The victim archetype is our relationship with our power and our relationship with boundaries. And boundaries represent our ability to differentiate self from other, right? And I'll unpack how that relates to pain. So, if we take the first thing I said, which is the victim archetype is your relationship with power. What the victim does is the victim plays a powerless role as a way of gaining a sense of power and control. So I'll unpack that. When I was a child, I played the victim by being in pain. My mom took me to my dad's office and I got all of my needs met. So I played a powerless role as a way of gaining a sense of power and control, which means I could manipulate the familial and relational circumstances in order for me to get my dad to be who I wanted or needed him to be. Right? So I play a sense of powerlessness as a way of attracting a caretaker or a rescuer that can then help me get my needs met. Right? So powerless role as a way of gaining power and control. That's one example of how the victim archetype relates to chronic pain. The second piece, and I'm going to relate this to a few areas of your focus, which is skin health and gut health, which is the victim is your relationship with boundaries. So we feel victimized when a boundary is being crossed, right? We feel victimized when someone crosses a physical boundary. Maybe they punch us or hit us or physically attack us, or when an emotional boundary is being crossed or an energetic boundary is being crossed. We always feel like the victim when there's some perpetrator crossing a boundary. And healing the victim archetype is a lot about reestablishing boundaries where you can differentiate self from other. You can differentiate my pain from your pain, my emotions from your emotions, my body from your body, right? So see, a lot of the victim is how I differentiate me from you. And if we look at the human body, not just physically, but also energetically, the skin is the first boundary that differentiates the internal environment from the external environment. And then also the gut lining, right? The intestinal barrier is also, medically speaking, what differentiates on a cellular level what's you from what's not you. So when we have something like gut permeability and you have undigested proteins, bacteria entering general circulation, entering your bloodstream, now your immune system's on high alert and is attacking these foreign organisms or proteins. And your immune system starts to have a hard time differentiating self from other because the boundary is broken down. A lot of times that's actually a mirror representation of the ways in which someone feels that way in their external environment, where you get to a point where now in the human body with that broken barrier, the immune system starts to see everything as a threat. Well, that's very related to the victim archetype because the victim archetype is always on the lookout for threats. So for someone that's trapped in the victim archetype, seeing the whole world as perpetrators, whether it's because of their childhood trauma, ancestral trauma, things like that, that can immediately have an impact on how the immune system responds. If your psyche is perceiving everything as a threat, that's sending messages to your body, to your nervous system, and to your immune system to always stay on high alert, right? So you see how the body is actually a mirror representation of how a lot of these archetypes end up creating this sense of how we're relating to the world, right? So the internal environment and the external environment and our perception of it always mirroring one another.